Okay, welcome everybody. I will call the Newcastle Planning Board meeting of April 18th, 2024, 6:30 PM to order. Second thing, the agenda was to review the minutes from our March 21st, 2024 Planning Board meeting, that should have said. We'll have those at our next meeting.
I forgot to include those in your packet, so my mistake. Sorry.
No problem. No old business, new business. Item A. 684 US Route 1, Stantec Solar, map 004 lot 087. Request for an extension of special use permit. So
I provided some background in a memo.
Mhm.
And a applicant, I assume, is here to kind of explain what they're looking for. There's two things, and I just want to I guess run through the kind of questions because some of it's administrative. The special permit lasts just by default for 2 years. The planning board can reduce or could reduce that. They didn't, as far as I can tell from the minutes. The planning board can extend that if the applicant can show a hardship. There is a second part of this, which is that the applicant also would like to amend the plan that was from what was originally approved. So I don't think it was explicitly said, maybe in at least what I saw in the approval, but it would have been a large project plan. And amendments can be reviewed and approved for large project plans by the code enforcement officer. But I think for just like process, this is basically two separate things. It is and that's why I only have the special use permit on the agenda. It's does the plan, the planning board can review for extending a special use permit, and then a whole kind of separate question would be amending the uh, plan. So I imagine you want some context, but I'll just want to provide some of that.
Yeah, before we get there, I just want to sorry, this is just a point of clarity on the code. There's some terminology that is confusing. And you just triggered something in my brain. So I just want to make sure we're understanding it correctly. The term special use permit and special permit are actually two different things.
Oh, okay.
Just so that we understand that a special permit is an entire different permitting flow structure through the core zoning code. Special use permit applies to just a category of uses determined to be special for one reason or another, either in a district or because of the nature of the use itself, which does, by definition, trigger a special permit process. So just so that we understand the mechanisms involved here, I think the argument of whether or not the permitting process goes through special permit and is therefore handled by the planning board, because planning board is responsible for special permit as well as large project plans for most things, or is handled administratively by the CEO. Special permit is always handled by planning board.
And so are you saying that a special permit is basically would replace a large project plan?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I believe that that's, yeah. So like, if you look under, sorry to hold it up. I want to be clear before we get our stuff. All right, so if you look under application types, which is on page 78,
Mhm.
under item C, development review, right? We've got small project plan, large project plan, subdivision, master plan, plan revision, use permit, residential companion use permit, expanded use permit, special permit, variance. I see each of those as being independent from each other.
Yeah, like you may need multiple.
You may need multiple.
Yeah.
Oftentimes you do. Yes, absolutely. But then one does not supersede the other or is encompassed by the other. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, they kind of overlap. You need to meet
You got to meet all of them.
the
Exactly.
the requirement for a use permit as well as the large project.
Correct.
Because for the most part, the project plan stuff and subdivision, that's more physical design. What are you going to build? The use permit is like, what are you going to do?
Right. Exactly.
Generally, yeah.
All right. I know that's just a small thing, but I just want to make it clear.
But that's so. Um, and that's why I think this is like there's two separate things to consider, which is the special permit or special use permit, which I don't know if there's though are those separate. I that wasn't clear.
Yeah.
But the special permit is a separate whole separate like the special use permit could be extended and then the plan amendment could be denied. It would be kind of a moot point if the special use permit was if the extension was denied, then there really wouldn't be a point to amend the plan. But you basically both need to happen, I think, in order to have the project move forward the way that Apple wants it
Right.
forward. But
Yeah. Right. Sorry, I'm just crossing T's, dotting I's here. Doing this in real time, so I apologize. And under let's see, so yeah, page 92, planning board, item A, responsibilities. Item 2C, planning board reviews and approves all applications for special permit. So, and then, back to the actual. Sorry, bear with me here. Yeah. So, okay. So that is interesting. The term special use does not actually appear at all.
that I was just looking. It doesn't. I think that came from somewhere. I don't. But
Yeah. No. I think that so when you look at any district page, that has the use table of the district page, you'll see on the use table legend
yeah,
that the circle with a 2 in it, that is special permit required for those uses. So I think this application is in the rural highway district. So I was just looking at that district page just for an example and looking to see which one. So district energy system, utilities and services, outdoor amusement, bar or tavern, aquaculture. Those are the uses that specifically call out a use, special use. A special permit is required. Sorry, not special use. It's just a special permit.
yeah.
Yeah.
I may I just got
I'm not
put in my head, but
I'm not picking on you at all. I'm not picking on you.
It's a special permit.
It's a special permit. I just want to make sure that, I mean, that doesn't mean that it's not also a large project.
Right. Yeah, that's what I figured. If you're building something, you need a plan.
Yeah. Right.
Because I think if you look at this, like what a large project plan.
Yeah.
The applicability of it.
Yeah.
You're gonna.
Yeah. I'll look at that. Yeah. Yeah, so large project plan 79, page 79, item 11. A purpose, item 2. And actually, item 1, provide for the review of projects, including development of individual buildings, modifications to buildings, changes or alterations made to a site or other projects that may have the potential to create significant offsite impacts according to the applicability standards below. And then you get into those applicability standards and it's talking about, anything over 10,000 square feet or on-site significant impacts. It may include, but not limited to excavation, grading, blasting, noise, glare, and smell, blah, blah, blah. Building groups, etc. Site improvements, creating more than 50 parking spaces. So I guess I see where the maybe some of the confusion is, because special permit, really the applicability says, I'm back on page 86.
Mhm.
Number 1, special permits may only be requested as specifically authorized by this code. No zoning permit may be issued for development that requires or requests a special permit until the discretionary review process for a special permit has been completed in accordance with the standards of this article. The approval or denial of an application for a special permit is the reasonable discretion of the planning board. And then it talks about conditions, approval standards and conditions and procedure and validity. So they're meant to be, you gotta do one then the other, not just one, you know what I mean? Because there's no other review criteria for special permit like there is in large or small project plans.
And I think this is one of the things that came up, is like, if you're going to review a special permit, you review it basically on the merits of the project.
Yep.
So they do kind of need to go together, even though there are separate things.
Yes.
But
I think we could make it clear in the code or in the guidance that every project that requires an application, so in other words, anything essentially, is either a small project plan or a large project plan, and maybe other things.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably make a subdivision that,
Yeah, or subdivision, I guess, could, because you could just do subdivision
you could, subdivide with no building.
with nothing, no use, no building, no nothing. But that's pretty much it. I mean,
think so.
everything is one of those 3
Well,
things.
a master plan maybe would be the 4th, but I'm not super familiar with the master plan thing, but that's the only other one that I see is potentially separate. That like it wouldn't be a small, large, or something. I don't know. Master plan probably incorporates.
Well, it incorporates all those things.
Yeah,
yeah.
But there's those. You're probably going to fall into one of those and also you need you probably need a use permit if you're trying to do anything.
Right, but you could do subdivision without a use permit.
And I imagine you could do a use permit without like if you already have a building that's empty and I want to establish this use.
Correct. You could just do a use
without
permit. Right.
Actual building. But
okay. All right. Sorry for that little tangent. I just wanted to, again, clear as mud. So somehow we need to remember to make it less muddy.
we got some changes coming in, especially
We can't do everything.
And
We can't do everything.
We'll get to
right.
more
okay
as we get to them.
That's right. All right. So let's get back on track here. do you need to say anything else or do we want to? All right. Can we have you come up and tell us a little bit more about the project and refresh our memories from 2 years ago? And
Hard to believe.
yeah, it really is.
Has gone by. There. As you look at these, the one on that side is what was approved. This is what the amendment would be. Good evening. My name is Brooke Barnes. I'm with Stantec Consulting down in Topsom, and darn it, knocked it over right away.
The table, the wheels at the,
They
yeah,
lock.
they lock. Yeah. Cool.
I represent Route One Solar LLC, which is Norwich Energy, which has a number of these small size projects throughout the state. As stated 2 years ago, we were here and you issued a a special permit for the project back then. It was this project over here. And as Mike said, there are two things we'd like to accomplish this evening if we could. The first is extending that special permit for a year. And the second is an approval of, excuse me, the amendment of the project itself. As far as the extension for the project construction, each project of this size has to go through a cluster study and transmission upgrades through CMP before it can be constructed. Those still haven't been done. 2 years later, the project is waiting on that. Out of frustration and to get something built, they've proposed the project on my left, which is below 1 megawatt. That's sort of the threshold. Over 1 megawatt, it's an L4 project and has to do the cluster study and transmission upgrades. An L2 project, less than 1 megawatt, which is what's designed here now, doesn't need to do that. So that means they can move forward. They don't have to sit around and just wait for CMP to take action. And they hope to move forward this year with construction. So that's the reason why they haven't been able to get constructed and started in the last 2 years. I can pause there and answer any questions, or I'll just launch into sort of what the changes are.
So CMP is conducting,
The cluster studies, which have been conducting for some time.
and they're
all
still
across the
conducting
state.
them.
Yeah.
And there's no end date in sight? Nothing given?
Nope. And this is happening with so many of these projects. They're just out of frustration. They're downsizing. Because it's like, well, we can, wait and wait and wait, but is it going to be another year? Is it going to be another 2 years?
So the reason for downsizing is to avoid having to do this involved
To
with the
get out of
study?
to get out of the delay caused by this study, which is just waiting and waiting and waiting.
And the threshold for the study is 1 megawatt?
So the size difference, this was about 1.975 and this is 0.97. The changes are the fenced area is about cut in half from 13.8 acres to 6.8 acres. The total area of disturbance goes from nearly 20 acres to 16 acres. Physically, let me know if you can't catch this. Physically, the changes are, let's see here. This is where the power will go now. It's underground power. It was going to sort of come off here and follow the road. This just shortens the route. They've got a 15-foot road through here just for access and to get the power down that way. They pulled in the clearing, so there's less clearing associated with it. But all the entrance, this road, all remain the same. These pads here for construction, and the array itself has been, as you can see, has shrunk considerably just because of the lower generation capacity. So that's why we're here and what the changes are. That's our request, is that those two things be approved.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions?
I had one, and it was not real, I'm just wondering why the one fence line was moved and clearing reduced, but the other sort of on the west side, the line, fence line wasn't moved, although the panel array is shifted to the
Here,
east. Yeah, why not move the
It
fence line on
actually-
that side also?
it's difficult to tell, but it actually is moved in. If you look at this
No,
distance from
not on
here-
that side, on the other side.
Oh, on here,
Yeah, that fence line is
that's,
unchanged, and I was just wondering,
and I think that this is not optimal. That distance between the fence line and the limit of clearing,
yeah, okay.
from a production
Now it's better.
standpoint. And they probably thought, well, if we're shrinking it now, we don't have shading and we can
Uh-huh.
keep that limit of clearing. So that's why that wasn't reduced.
Is that darker, the darker, heavier kind of line? That's not the fencing, that's the clearing. And then there's a lighter line that's closer to the,
Correct. This
Okay.
one with the dots
That's
is the
the
fence line.
Right.
This is the clearing limit.
Right,
And what they need to do is clear well beyond the fence so that
Mhm.
they don't get shading during the day from trees and diminish the power capacity.
Go ahead.
so is there a, I don't understand, don't know the whole process, but there was already a permit from CMP to do this pending the cluster, or is there no
Nope.
permit from CMP necessary?
That's, they could not build until this cluster study and any transmission upgrades are done.
Yeah.
So it's indefinite. And they're just waiting. They went ahead and got their permits, got ready to go so that if the cluster study was complete, the transmission upgrades were done, then they could build. And at this point, again, with the unknown, they're just like, we want to do something.
Do you have any correspondence with CMP about this? Or it's just like radio silence from CMP, you're just literally waiting to hear from them?
I'm sure at the Public Utilities Commission, in the regulatory filings, there's more information about the cluster studies that are going on across the state.
Yeah.
And their status. But they don't say, and will be done in 6 months, or will be done in a year.
Sure.
They just say this section of line needs a cluster study and probably transmission upgrades.
I guess what I'm kind of like from the perspective of Newcastle and the language of our code, and I'm trying to unpack the procedures of it or whatever, but it says demonstrated hardship.
Mhm.
Without any documentation, how do I, for future historical purposes, look back and say we approved something with no documentation that proves undue hardship?
You have the cover letter that was submitted,
Well,
states basically due to the delays in the cluster study, that's why we're here.
sure.
That's the undue hardship.
Yeah, no, I get that. That's the reason. The proof of that though is not just, no offense, your say so.
Mm-hmm.
It would be something from CMP saying, hey, we're not done yet, or cluster study is still ongoing, or, let me put it to you another way. If another applicant was in here asking for the same sort of thing, and the burden was proving undue hardship, we would want more documentation from them than just their word
Mm-hmm.
that they're having an undue hardship. And again, this isn't personal, no offense, but we would need to see something that shows, hey, the bank's not giving me the money, or the excavator broke and fell apart, or you know what I mean? Like, we would need to see that proof. And then we'd go, oh, okay, that's an undue hardship. And we could rule on those merits.
I think what I'm struggling with too is we're at the 2-year mark
Mm.
within days.
Mhm.
So, maybe if you were back here 9 months ago, and saying, I still haven't heard anything, we still want to move forward, and then 6 months you're here and you're saying, I'm still not moving forward, but we're at the dead end of your contract. Like Ben said, it clearly says we have to have, the only way we can extend it is to see hardship.
I actually think that if, and so there's the undue hardship thing. Let's put that on a shelf for just a second. And then the other aspect of this, of course, is that the plan is being modified. So for like a plan revision, If the changes were minimal, the argument could be made, this is a simple revision. But we're talking about literally cutting the project in half in terms of scale, size. So it's hard on the face of it to say, well, that shouldn't actually just be considered a new permit application submission because the metrics have changed. And a lot of the studies that went into it, I mean, we spent a lot of time first time around 2 years ago talking about the environmental impact studies. And it was a wonderful application that you put together. And I believe that truly all of that stuff is still relevant. I don't know that ground conditions have changed such that you would need to redo large portions of the application. However, if the goal is an extension and changing the thing with the procedures that we have in place and the burden that we have to show undue hardship, the argument could easily be made that the best course forward is to suggest that you just simply submit a new application for a special permit review with the new design. That'll give you 2 years if it's approved instead of the 12 months you're requesting. And especially since you don't know CMP's timetable on when they're going to do these clusters, you're going to get out of these cluster studies anyway by going smaller. But you'd have the 2 years to, from that date forward, to go forward. If you had any other unforeseen things happen, you'd have those 2 years instead of the 12 months, and we wouldn't have to come back again if conditions changed again. I guess I feel like I can't make the recommendation that you do that. That's up to you. But on the face of it, I do have trouble tonight saying we have met the burden of undue hardship. I would want to see something. I'd have to ask you to come back with that, whatever form you could dig up. That'd have you back here next month. I'd leave it in your
Well,
and your client's,
sure. Let me,
decision-making matrix to determine what course of action you think would make sense.
something I don't know is there a way to keep this permit alive until your next meeting? Because I don't know if the permit expires, if they basically lose all their position at CMP and they can't possibly build the project. I don't know that. I don't know enough about the line that you have to get in the queue. So I don't know if it has massive ramifications, if the permit just expires, so they couldn't come back and approve it. I'm sure we can get documentation of what's going on with cluster study, and that's why nothing's been done. I just don't have it with me this evening. So I don't know if there's some way, I mean, if we could take a moment, I could make a phone call and see if somebody can, fax a CMP document in here while we're here, or fax it in tomorrow or something like that. I just don't have it with me.
But then we'd still be saddled with the two issues. The first one being, that we're on twin tracks here. We're talking about extending the special permit, but we're also talking about significant modifications to the permit. So we could follow both tracks, but I would say that if we follow the extension of the permit, fine. When we get to the conversation about changing the argument, I think I'm going to be putting forward is that is technically a new permit because of the substantial modifications.
Well,
If this was a house.
Yeah, but let me challenge it for a moment if I
Sure.
could, because the modification is all a reduction. All of the analysis of impact has been on the larger footprint, the larger clearing, the larger everything. And now basically what they're going to build is a much smaller project.
Sure.
So it's a change, but it's a reduction within the area that's already been analyzed for impacts.
Sure. So let's just keep that
Sure.
going for a second. If someone came to the planning board and said, I'm going to build a 5,000 square foot Gothic mansion.
Mhm.
And then before they began substantial construction, indeed, before they even broke ground, they decided, no, actually, it's going to be a ranch. And they used your argument. I would say, no, your plan has substantially changed. What we permitted you for was this. You've now changed it to this. It is different. And a reduction isn't an argument of compliance. Any change to a plan is a change, regardless of whether it's larger or smaller,
Right.
under our code. I don't see it any other way.
I think usually I mean, I understand, I think usually the protections are to make sure that plans don't expand without returning to whatever reviewing body. Now, if you're talking about amendment, but I think that, you know, if a plan changes enough, it's, you know, yeah, you could look at it in the plan.
It's also, I mean, the other part of the reason for any change to a plan being something that's important to review as a whole, the argument is that, you know, the public, it's been 2 years. It's a substantial change. Abutters should be re-notified of that change, and the public should be notified of that change and given an opportunity to comment on that change. Now, it may all be, and I can't assume anything, but it may all be completely positive and happy and wonderful. But to deny that opportunity is something that, you know, we don't actually have the authority to just go, we don't need it. Process. Does that make sense? I mean,
And I think that the 2 year, you know, there's a reason that things expire, and it's not just because like, well, we don't want to have, you know, the paperwork lingering forever. It's, you know, the facts on the ground change, the circumstances change, may not be significant.
so, I mean, I don't want to sound completely insensitive, and I think, you know, we can be flexible, especially with a special permit process, and with there being the unknowns of whether you lose out on a prior approval and you lose your place in the queue of CMP's hierarchy of consideration or whatever, not knowing the answer to that and the impact that it may have on the project. I think I might suggest that we talk about maybe extending the special permit a month or 6 weeks while that information is gathered, and we bring it back up and essentially table it for tonight. You know, suggest that we extend the permit that long until we can get those answered. Maybe other parts of the conversation could be drawn in that we've had, and then come back and we'd all be more informed,
Yes.
and that might work. And that might be enough to maybe not, you know, lose out with CMP if that's a potential problem. And then we'd all have more information at our next planning board meeting. I don't know if that's something that I think that's something we could.
Yeah, you know, I'm just thinking about it. The under the validity, it does just say that requests for extensions for extension of the duration of the validity must be submitted to the office of the code enforcement officer in a timely manner so as to be scheduled and heard by the planning board prior to expiration of the special permit. So like that's been met. It doesn't say anything like, oh, it has to be extended. You know, I might suggest that you can extend the permit next month. Almost, wouldn't really be retroactively, but you're saying, again, the permit now is extended for a year from the original. I guess what I'm saying is I'm not sure you need to extend it for a month. You might be able to just like extend it next month for a year.
Extend it next month for you. Don't act on it now. So you say
So table
the
it,
burden has
basically.
been table it till next meeting, gather more information, decide in a month.
Yeah. I think you can do that, but
No, I think you're actually right by a reading. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm an attorney
Great.
and
Love it.
This makes me nervous because there is an expiration date. And I don't think your code says that you must take action by that expiration date. It says, as you've said, you've got to submit prior to that expiration date in time for you all to consider it. I would ask at least for you guys to put on the record that your understanding is
Sure.
that this expiration date could go by, and because you've tabled it, it still would be appropriate to consider it at the next planning board meeting. Just so there's some record of that, because you know,
Yep.
I'm not convinced that legally that's 100% defensible, but at least you guys can say that's our understanding. And the reason is for, you know, the applicant to gather more information.
Yeah, I mean, the alternative is to extend it for a month. Um,
And I wouldn't do that either, because what you're saying, and again, I'm talking against my interest, but you're saying we haven't met the burden of showing, you know,
Yeah.
the insurmountable burden. So if you extended for a month, you'd basically be saying, oh, well, you have met it, but only for a month.
yeah, I think
So-
that was my hesitation.
Yeah,
I
Um,
don't think I'd do that.
if there was like a, you know, we're trying to find that third middle ground of
I
like,
know.
we're figuring out whether or not we can extend it.
Mhm.
Well, I think tabling it with a good, clear statement of your understanding and your intent
Mhm.
is that you don't wish for it to expire, and instead you want to table it so that you can gather more information and take it up fully at the next meeting. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think
I think that's
Certainly.
probably the safer legal route.
Yeah, and I apologize, I don't have these specifics.
No, it's fine. I just,
And if we were to extend it, I'm sure the applicant and you wanted a formal amendment application that was noticed and all of that to go through the process of approving that. I'm sure the applicant would be fine with that.
I mean, if we table it, let's just play out some of the other scenarios, right? If we table it, to next meeting with a clear understanding of what we're doing. And, in the intervening time, it's determined, no, you wouldn't lose your place in line. The option would exist to simply let the old permit expire in due course. File a new
Mhm.
permit with all the original site attachments, and with
With
that,
all the updated site.
with the updated stuff. Yeah, and the one thing tiny tangent, I remember and I look back, in the old one, there was another picture that showed distances, and this one doesn't, unfortunately, show.
Yeah, this isn't the full plan
It's
set. I
not the
just
full plan
grabbed
set, exactly.
the picture.
So I don't think, I mean, just based on that, I don't think, without having those details, we wouldn't be able to approve it as a change anyway.
Mhm.
From that perspective, we'd need to see all that, because I'd have to go into the official approved.
Mhm.
We couldn't do it tonight regardless, I think.
Yeah.
So, I guess following that line of thought, the option would be there to just, okay, well, we don't lose anything, we don't gain anything, let's just do a new one with this updated thing. We come back, we don't even have to discuss that, we just close that old one out and we
Mhm.
start the new one.
Yeah, as I say, I don't know enough about the CMPQ to know if basically it poses them completely if if
Yeah.
they don't keep the old permit alive. So I'd be just cautious about them.
Sure. Any other thoughts? Have I gone off the deep end again?
No,
I tend to overthink these things.
I just go back to waiting till the last minute is kind of puts us all kind of in a bind. Because we don't have those extra months even to, I mean, it's gonna expire. And,
Yeah.
you know, a few months ago, it gives you a little more time to work with than what we have now. So,
I know from the applicant's perspective, hoping they
Yeah.
could build twice the project if they could just get that CMP decision.
Yep.
So that factors into the April 1st, I think was when we sent this in. So it is last minute, but that was the thinking. Yeah.
So it sounds to me like the moving forward is to table the request for an extension. It's not denied. It's not approved. And with the understanding that at the next meeting, even though it will be after it'll be more than 2 years from the original approval, that the planning board will still be able to grant an extension, deny an extension, be able to kind of act completely on that request. Because the request came in and met the criteria for the code for a request for an extension. Excuse me. before the expiration. So I think that seems, you let me know if that's correct.
Well, I think you're absolutely right in pointing out the fact that there's no language that sets a time
For you to act.
for us to act on a special permit extension. Therefore, it's up to us what that is. It doesn't say we have to do it right now. It doesn't say we have to do it within 30 days or 45 days or 60 days. And so I think legally, tabling it is a perfectly legal course of action. Because the applicant has met the other requirement, which was to submit it before the deadline.
And then, so if that's the way to move forward, then, or the, the way that you all want to move forward, then the other question is, as far as the revision to the plan, is there anything that I guess what I'm trying to figure out is next month when we have some more information, I think that the request for, some kind of substantive, definitive, kind of like, here is a hard documentation of the hardship, which I think is I hadn't thought about that, but I think it's a totally reasonable thing. Or we want anything we that you're going to consider, you want to be able to put in the record. Now, again, it's not an issue of trust. It's like, here's, kind of third party record. Is there anything besides kind of the CMP documentation of the CMP process that might impact the demonstration of hardship? And is there anything that the board might want in considering an alteration of the plan? Like to have available so that next meeting that the board had just in preparation. That way it's not like, oh, we would love to have that. Can you bring it in a month from
From next month.
That's what I'm trying to get at is.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of what I was getting at when I was talking about the dimensions basically on the plan. That was the thing that jumped out at me as being not present on the amendment. And it was the only thing that I could think of, honestly, that was different. Just because there was a different diagram that showed how long the road was, how wide it was, how far to the fence line, how far to the back, and what the setback was from the back side and the front side. And, all that sort of setback information was present, which isn't. And I think other than that.
And that's part of this full plan set. You can see this is sheet C1001.
Yep.
And that's the same sheet.
Right.
Behind it is a full plan set.
Sure.
And
Yeah, I'm sure it exists. I think we just have to have it, is it? So, I can't say, obviously, but if the new plan set and application came in as complete as the old one, then I can't.
Well, do you want us to go ahead? I guess is time to do notice and everything like that. To submit the amendment. I'm calling it an amendment to do this size reduction. Is there time to do public notice and everything, have it considered at the next board meeting? Or might we have to do it in 2 steps? If you grant the extension, then we would then come back at a later time to do this. I think you're suggesting maybe there's some way to do it all at once, but there may not be.
Well, I just want to, if we have the information available, then
Yeah.
that's at least one step. Not that it might not be something else new that pops up.
Right.
Information, but and I guess maybe the first question is like, does the board, which it sounds like yes, but board does want to consider reviewing, or basically the board wants to review the plan amendment and not say that code enforcement officer couldn't be.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's,
I'm not sure how the rest of the board feels.
I guess what I like, we were discussing earlier, like, there's the two separate issues of the special permit and then the project plan.
Yeah.
And to me, it seems like the special permit would be something that, you know, the board can consider and approve, and an applicant would need if they're gonna move forward. And the board might want basically everything that whichever body reviews the project plan also might want, because then you have, you're gonna have only, you're not necessarily approving the plan, you're saying, yeah, we've looked at this, considered your whole plan. You might be considering all of the same things and more. And then the code enforcement officer or, you know, planning board could, if it was efficient, the planning board would review both, but,
Yeah,
uh,
I'm trying to determine if based on notice, we can do that. At the same time.
well, I mean, as far as I've seen, there's really not requirements for notice for revisions. But I do think that there's, oh, we also have to have the conversation about when the next meeting is gonna be.
We do.
But I think I do think there is enough time because it's, you know, I don't
Hmm.
get it in the newspaper twice. I think it's,
I'm just reviewing it real quickly.
I think, yeah, I mean, we could get it in the newspaper for the 25th, 2nd and 9th, before the 16th, that one.
So, yeah, that's interesting. So under there's a table 7.1 on page 76. Notices and public hearings, and for large project plan notices required, public hearing may be required. But under special permit, notice is definitely required and public hearing is also definitely required.
And under rural highway, when you go to utilities, which this is, and
Mhm.
solar, it is definitely a planning board special permit required.
Correct.
So it is a special permit.
Yeah, I think we completely agree. It's a special permit. Our understanding was that the code enforcement officer could approve a change in the plan, not a change in the permit itself, but a change in the plan.
Where do you recall where you got that?
I think
Kara conversations with
Okay.
Mike, yeah.
Alright.
Kara from my office had a conversation with Mike.
Do you recall where
That-
that came out of? Like
Why-
where in the code is that?
Well, I think this, so the large project plan and small project plan, but the large project plan basically talks about code enforcement officer, code enforcement officer, code enforcement officer.
Yep.
You know, this is a kind of a separate issue in the code that we might want to clean up. I think the building tables say require, you know, CEO or planning board approval for buildings. My assumption was that there's no buildings on this plan because it's solar panels and equipment and things with the, from the conversation we had a previous solar panel, none of these are buildings, so it's not going to fall under a building table. So special permit, planning board.
Right.
And I, like we were saying a second ago, I think the planning board can ask for basically all of the same things that you might need for a large project plan, because you're gonna want to see, you may want to see all that information.
Mhm.
As far as amendments to a large project plan, where it says amendments to be approved, amendments must be submitted to the Office of the Code Enforcement Officer. When considering a revision to a previously approved application, the code enforcement officer must limit their review to the proposed changes. It only really talks about code enforcement officer reviewing
Mhm.
application. It also only talks about the code enforcement officer reviewing anything for large project plan,
Mhm.
which again, I think is just a consistency thing we may want to address in the code, but so that's why I said
Mhm.
an amendment to the plan, the code enforcement officer could do.
Yeah, I mean, I struggle with that because
I think it gets a little bit fuzzy is like, if you amend a plan, do you also need to amend your special permit?
Yeah.
Which I think, is not unreasonable. I mean, I think that's because if not, you kind of make this way to go around special permit,
right,
which defeats the purpose of a special permit.
right.
But the special permit, I don't think has,
Doesn't have any language for amendments.
yeah. So that's where,
And I'd suggest that the special permit is in the sort of realm of a zone, of creating almost a special use zone. I used the wrong words. But it's creating a special zone, and that's the planning board saying, yes, this zone can be used for this purpose. And you've given us a plan to say what you're going to do in that zone. But we're the ones who are going to say yes or no to this zone. And then if you change the plan, then you go to the code enforcement officer and get approval for that plan change. You're not changing the designation of the special permit and the use that's going to happen. Because you guys get to decide that.
yeah, but I imagine, I think some of the issue is some of the details that are in the plan are going to be considered when you're considering the special use permit. So I think that's where there's like, it feels weird to issue a special permit and then have the plan that's associated with shift without having the review of the special plan also, without having that review. So, which I don't, I guess, but at the end of the day, I think we can make that happen.
Mhm.
Right? I think we can have a special permit review of like almost like a special permit amendment review.
Mhm.
So we could kind of potentially could extend the permit,
Mhm.
review an amendment of that special permit, and then also have an amendment of the plan could be.
Yeah,
It just seems like we're gonna keep it really clean, because at a lot of meetings, we've talked about things that, and we'll have people say, well, where was that in the meeting? Or they want to go back and see it and it's not there. So I think as we all move forward, the special permit, and I wasn't part of this whole thing then, but the special permit is on the big plan. Well, now it's gonna be scaled down a lot. So if nothing else, if we don't get a whole new permit, there has to be a huge amendment to that permit that's attached
Mhm.
to show that because if not, who says when you guys come back and just start adding on because you have a permit that says I can build all this.
And that's why I think if you say, we're.
So I think there's
extend this
more to
permit-
just extending.
No, right. That's what I mean is if you could extend it as kind of like one action and then at the same time, or kind of if you want to think about it separately, you can also then say, yes, okay, we've extended the original permit for a year. And now we're going to modify that original permit to match this special use plan.
so I
So-
guess I'm just gonna try and pull it all together real quick, because I did find one more thing. I really appreciate the way you described that. Unfortunately, I can't find that representation of how special permit is sort of like a overlay on a zone and then the code enforcement officer to handle the large permit application. The purpose of a special permit, as stated in the code, 18A1 says to authorize a predetermined type of exception from the standards of this code within specific limitations and subject to some performance measures. So that doesn't actually say, that doesn't indicate to me that we're just talking about, it indicates to me that we're talking about the complete depth and consideration of the large permit as well as the special permit process. Does that make sense?
Mm,
And just to further bolster that, under D3, procedure D3, it says, when considering a revision to a previously approved application for a special permit.
Hmm.
This is the only language we have.
Hmm.
The planning board must limit its review to the proposed changes to the previously approved application, which lends weight to the argument that the planning board has a process to do a revision, not an amendment, but a revision to a previously approved application, that it is handled not by the CEO, but by the planning board
Yeah.
in its entirety. The whole depth of the application is handled by the planning board. Is everyone with me? So I think that's where I'm going to kind of stick it. And say that's where the rubber meets the road.
So a two-step process, basically, if you choose to table it, we deal with the extension issue, and then we would submit a revision
Yep.
to the special use permit, which would include this reduction.
I think that's the best way to handle it. Yeah, again, there's nothing says we can't table it. And in fact, we should table it, pending more documentation.
Yeah.
And then we'll review. In the meantime, you could submit it as a revision, a complete revision.
Mhm.
We'll have a complete revised site plan.
A question, and now I'm going immediately to sort of production and how
Yep.
fast can we get this done and everything.
Yep.
There are many sections
Yes.
associated with the special use permit. Is it okay to say no change, no change, no change, no
Absolutely.
change? Instead of sort of regurgitating everything all over again,
I
and only call out those areas where there are changes
Well,
associated with this.
I'll just
think
read
that
the
would-
language
That
again.
would help.
The language actually says, when considering a revision to a previously approved application for special permit, the planning board must limit its review to the proposed changes. So I
yeah,
think that's all we need, and that's all we can consider at that time.
it'll
Thank you.
save us the trouble of.
It'll save us a ton of
Yeah.
trouble, save you a ton of work.
Say,
Yes,
there is
exactly.
no change.
Yeah, just highlight what the changes.
Um,
So,
But it would still, just to be clear, it would still need to be, we would only limit to the changes, but it still has to be a complete form.
Yes.
Again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but
Yep. Don't just say,
We-
these are the changes.
don't just say these are the
Yeah,
changes.
go through.
We
That's
actually
why
need
I
to
said,
see them.
is it okay to call out the section and say no change?
Correct.
Call out the section.
Well, we got to see those
Because that is a
We
good
gotta-
record.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Got to show it in record. Got it.
right, in
Got
a,
it.
in a year, we want to be able to have something that says,
Yeah.
this is what was approved, even though it is not changed from.
Right.
So for the next meeting, we are going to consider an extension of the existing special permit and basically have the submission
revision.
for reviewing the revision. Not gonna, and presumably the extension could be denied, but we're gonna at least be prepared with the possibility that the extension is approved, and then immediately following that, we can consider the.
There's no reason I see that they couldn't be considered on the same agenda.
Yeah, okay, that's assuming that you get your whole turnaround and everything.
Yeah, and I guess maybe we can talk afterwards, but what's the deadline? When do we need to have it filed with you in order to make that?
That's,
Is it today?
we have.
Stick
to-
around for just a minute because
Yeah.
we actually have to discuss our next meeting. So
Okay.
Is
we
this,
can give you an answer to that in a minute.
is this, are we doing, I don't think it says specifically, but it seems to me like it would, if you wanted to be conservative and cautious, this should be noticed and there should be a public hearing.
This is what I'm going back to, exactly. Under public notice, under applicability, literally the only thing it says is all projects.
Mm.
So I'm going to take the approach that that is a literal statement.
That,
Yep.
That
And a
applies to
revision
everything.
or an amendment to a plan is a project, it must be noticed.
yeah,
Everything.
that I think is,
Is that, am I wrong?
That's a good conservative way to go.
Better safe than sorry.
and if you don't have an issue with it, then I think we can may as well do it that way.
Yeah.
Which only changes, I ask mainly for the timing.
Notices must be mailed within 7 business days of submission of an application. Properties with 1,000, no. Within 250 feet of the subject property located in all other districts. Published notice. Where is it?
It's on the same page as that tape.
On the same page as, oh, yeah, right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the mail notice is just the 7 days. It actually doesn't even say. Just needs to be published, but
It does say that it just needs to be published, so. It needs to be in the, and we actually, I mean, we handle the, administratively, we handle the notices in the local paper.
Mhm.
As long as we have the application in hand in time to make paper.
Yep. And I'll talk with you further. Mike,
Yeah.
about what
Yeah.
that is,
Yeah.
what that date is. and-
Yeah. I think, well, you'll do the mailing and we'll handle the newspaper.
Yeah.
So, okay,
Okay.
you want to,
Yeah, I think we need to
Legally
take
table
a,
this.
a formal motion. And I think at this time, we don't have to go into the details. I think we can just say, I'll actually make a motion that we just table the application until the next planning board meeting. Full stop.
do you want to, with the understanding that,
Sorry, I apologize. I forgot about that part. With the understanding that the applicant did meet the deadline for filing for the special permit extension and that those rights are vested until a determination is made by the planning. Does that work? Thank you. And further discussion? All in favor of the motion? Okay, it passes 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your input, insight. The next thing we got to talk about, I think we'll just go straight into it, is, was this in your memo about, no, it wasn't.
no,
All right,
the,
so
the timing.
the timing, so Michael let me know in an email yesterday that his availability at our next regularly scheduled planning board meeting, which would be the 16th of May. You
I'll be
are,
out of town.
you're out of town.
And we talked about this a few months ago too, when I was considering.
You did, that's right, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I forgot.
No, I just want
Right.
to,
Yep.
I'm not
Yep.
just springing this.
Yep.
But we were talking about it.
Right.
via email.
And the likelihood that we will, well, now we know we have this on the agenda. We will have potentially up to 4 things on that agenda. None of them small. This potentially being the smallest. So the question for us is, while there's time, should we consider adjusting our meeting and noticing that we're going to have it on a different date and time? So that our planner can be with us. He will obviously, whether he's here or not, be preparing the documents that he usually does for us. It's just a question of whether we'd like to have him here and have his expertise on it.
I think it's very helpful.
I agree. I'd have to change the meeting date.
I think that'd be my preference as well. We're blessed with the fact that we actually have 5 Thursdays that month. Which is rare. So we could squeeze it into 3 weeks and say the 9th. That may run a little bit afoul of timetables required for, that we just motioned on, so I'd be inclined to suggest that maybe we push it to the 23rd.
The only issue with the 23rd is this room is being used by the Lincoln County Dems.
We can ask them to find another place.
That's,
I don't want to be brazen about that, but the fact of the matter is that town business takes precedence over other. And we're giving them more than a month's notice. Find alternate location.
that works for me. And I'm happy to try and coordinate that if for some reason can't make that work. The off chance, we'll say, that doesn't work, is the 30th, rather than saying like, well, now we can't have a meeting and while we're all here, is the 30th a reasonable backup or?
So my only concern with that, of course, is it puts us only 2 weeks away from our next planning board meeting, June 13th.
It's the 20th. Would be the,
I'm sorry, it'd be the 20th, it'd be 3 weeks. Never mind.
so I mean, I see no reason why the 23rd shouldn't, but I just, until we finalize that. You know, I like to have a backup.
So why don't we do this? I'll make a motion that we adjust or move our regularly scheduled planning board meeting for the month of May to the 23rd at 6:30 PM in this room. And authorize the town planner to adjust that to the 30th of May at 6:30 PM in this room, should a worthy reason arise to do so.
Right. That's, which hopefully there won't be.
Do I have a second?
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All in favor? Thank you very much.
Okay, so that means we'll prepare for the 23rd. Notice to abutters for the solar project we were talking about just need to go out basically by the 16th. Should be the 15th, really. We're gonna be safe, and I'll get notice in the newspaper for that public hearing that will happen on the 23rd.
Right.
For
So, yeah, just so the notice will need to go out and we'll need to receive.
Yeah.
The
which,
packet basically
yeah,
by the 15th for the revision.
the 9th,
Oh, sorry, 9.
if we can get it to the, if you can get to the office for the 9th, by the 9th, then I'll be able to hopefully review it and everything before.
Yes, I'm
I'm
sorry.
gonna, that means I'll try and have everything to you by the 16th. I'll try to have it to you before then, because I don't want to have to be dealing with it on the 15th or 16th, but yeah, so that
Right.
way, the 9th if you can.
No.
Digitally would be like that.
One digital copy.
Uh,
Please don't give us too much paper.
we may need a hard copy at some point once it's revised, but we can work. That will be separate from.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. All that's done? Okay. Timetable is complete, so. The only other thing we have left. Well, there's two things. You left off your planner's report
Oh,
off the agenda.
so,
Not on there. Don't you usually give us some sort of report?
oh, well, you know what? I gave you this memo and I'm,
You're thinking that, okay, that's great. That's fine.
so that's, I don't know if it's helpful
Thank you so much. Thank you, Walter. You bet. Have a great night.
to have like some kind of comments for stuff ahead of time. So I figure if this can, I mean, maybe I can just make it a planner's report. Anything that is not on the agenda, we can discuss after, but I'm just trying to kind of consolidate stuff.
Totally fine. Totally fine. So the next thing is to have a discussion about the application guidance, complete application, a continuation of the conversation that we had about complete applications and application guidance form that you've developed.
Yeah, which we were talking about the complete application requirements, which will work into the process of finding that an application is complete, and that starts timetables and things like that.
Yeah.
And I had spoken, Ben, with you today, and I don't know if we spoke earlier, but I've also been working on, there's some internal, like an admin stuff that happens in the office that is going to tie into any, like, well, it's going to tie into everything that happens. So this application guidance form is somewhat for the applicant, somewhat for the office. So when someone comes in, I made the point to Ben earlier, like when someone comes into the office, the only person who knows all the details of the project is the applicant, and it's the only people that are going to know whether or not it falls under small, large, or gets to make that decision is basically George, code enforcement officer, you all. I'd like to think I have a decent handle on it, but I don't get to make those decisions. So having something that kind of yes, no questions and says, okay, then you can hopefully 95% of the projects will be able to follow this and say, okay, here's the here's the two forms you need to fill out and simplify it and pay the fees and do whatever else. Because a lot of times applications come in and Shelley or whoever takes it in the office is like, it's a small project, it's a large project, the applications don't know, doesn't get determined until it comes here. So if we could at least make an informed guess in the office about that before it gets here, I think that'll help. And hopefully we'll save, people a lot of headache. If they can confirm this is a small project, it's only going to be $100 or whatever the fee is, rather than deal with everything else. Whether or not you go to shoreland zoning, that's not a question that Shelley should have to try and figure out the answer to. So that's what the beginning of this is. And then, what, a point, the final thing I'll say is when I get applications in, a lot of times the first thing I did was figure out what is not applicable to it, so I don't have to look at those standards. And I think that's kind of what this is all about. It's like, is shoreline zoning applicable here? No. Okay, then let's ignore that now and only focus on the stuff that actually is relevant. So that's all I'll say. Thoughts, and is the complete application part updates broken down into 3 sections? Does that make sense to you all?
Yeah, I think it does. As I was reviewing the table, the nice table you put together here, I was just replaying the conversations that we had sort of in my mind about, and some of the terminology kept tripping me up. But I think you've actually captured it the way that we landed. Does everyone else have that impression as well? Like that, I mean, we talked about a lot of issues about, requiring this and not requiring that. And, but I think you actually captured it quite well.
Good. I think if we want to simplify the application process, which I think is a good thing. I'm sure residents and applicants would love it if it was as simple as possible. Changing standards in the code and what they're applicable to is going to, at some point, we'll run up against that. Like if we regulate it, we have to have that conversation of like, if you really want to regulate this, it's going to complicate the review process and therefore the application. And so we have to say, have that conversation, but at least if we can get it here, there's a lot for a large project plan.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, no, it's,
You know, like,
I initially, so I was trying to be diplomatic, but when I first saw the table, I panicked because I was like, ooh, that's a lot. Like,
Mhm.
you got to do a lot. Like, but then I was replaying it in my mind and I was like, yeah, honestly, we want, first impressions are what they are, but we want to be clear about the fact that please come with either answers or having addressed in your application all these things so that we don't have to say, hey, you didn't address blah, come back in a month. Like, that's annoying. And
Mhm.
then, oh, missed another thing. You know what I mean? Like, if you've got this, it may look scary, but the way you've actually, after you get over the shock of the table, you go down, you read the notes, and you understand sort of how the thinking behind it is laid out. I think if we flesh that out a little bit more so that it's understandable to the layperson,
that's,
not just us.
yeah, which is, this is a draft, so
Absolutely.
I don't expect it to be perfect, so.
No, but once that language is added in, that's what I'm envisioning is
Mhm.
that it guides you very, hopefully concisely and succinctly, through that. And it does actually very nicely, then going back to look at the table, it very nicely demonstrates the difference of ease between a small and a large project,
Mhm.
which was our intent. That is the intent, that the burden is greater.
You know, the small project, there were more circles on there, and I was like, guess we can just not, like a lighting plan. The state, like lighting standards do seem to apply to a small project plan. Like, as far as I can tell, everything, all of the standards always apply. Um, but like a circulation plan maybe is like, if you're doing a small project plan, you might be able to say, all right, yeah, this looks like it meets it.
So one of the questions I had is, how in the core zoning code, sometimes there's like circle, and circle is either full
Mhm.
or it's got a half, and those mean different things.
Yeah.
I wondered because you're not wrong. Like if someone's coming with a small project plan, it's just like a house with a driveway. Well, yeah, we got to see the driveway. We have to see the driveway.
Right.
You got to show where the driveway
That's
is.
your circulation plan.
That's your circulation plan, but it doesn't have to be what it has to be for a large project plan. So would that be like a half circle, or you know what I mean?
Right.
Like these things apply, but not to the,
And I think we should make it clear, if I didn't, but that for a small project, and same thing with for a large project plan, like, yeah, you have to provide all of this stuff. But if that's just to say your application's complete and like the process starts, you get on the agenda and stuff like that. But that the planning board or the code enforcement officer always has the right to say, like, you didn't prove that you met the standard. I need more information or I have to reject it.
Yeah.
So there is that. So even if there's not a circle there, you gotta, you may end up needing to submit that in.
Yeah. So what did you, at the end of the document, you've got notes for planning board discussion, April 18th.
I didn't get a chance to dive into what was like the use permits, expanded use permit, residential companion, that side of things, which I think came up earlier. We need to figure out, like, well, when are these necessary? And I think it's essentially the question is going to be, which plan type are you going for and which use type are you going? Sometimes you may not need both, but like if you're coming and building something, you're gonna need a use. And you're gonna need a building. You're gonna need a plan type, right? You basically need both. There are times when you're not building anything, so you're just putting a new use or changing a use in an existing building. I don't know. There may be situations where you don't really need a plan. You probably still will, because we want to make sure that you're not putting a use in a building that's non-conforming. If you have no lighting on your site and you want to put a daycare in, it might be like, I don't know, or what, some use, like you need to meet the standards for. But so I don't know how you will Those are a little bit squishier, we may
Yeah.
just. I didn't get there yet, so.
I'm going back to sort of the tangent I had us on earlier, which was you're always filing a small project plan, a large project plan.
Mhm.
But is that actually true in your scenario where you're just changing the use? Or you're adding a use? Are you required to file a small project plan
Right.
or are you not?
I think if you're. Some of this comes into like the pre-existing nonconformity stuff.
Yeah.
But I think if you're, I imagine if you want,
Well, let's assume you're outside that,
well,
just for the sake of argument.
but if you're proposing a new use,
Let's say you've got,
can the planning board say you have to meet all of the standards? That's what I don't. Or at least we're gonna review to see whether or not you need to meet all the standards. That's the. I think we. might
Yeah, I
need
mean,
to
this is
figure
the-
that out.
well, we got to figure it out. That's a really interesting thing. For example, let's say you're in a building that is greater than 10,000 square feet. And you're not proposing to build or alter the building or the site conditions in any way. You're just adding a new use that is permittable. That is not a special permit or a residential companion. It's just a permittable use in the building. Are you required to file a large project plan? Or are
Even though
you,
you're not building. it.
even though you're not doing anything? Or are you just, or is use a completely separate track in the permitting process?
I think usually they are.
They are. That's your experience?
Yeah, but because in places that have a lot more, this is where you end up with like a zoning board of appeals. Here the appeals board usually is like, we don't like your decision, so we're going to appeal it to another authority. But a lot of times you have the planning board that deals with a lot of like the plan stuff, the building size. Do you meet all the standards for that? And the use is already decided. Basically, it's in the code. Like, are you allowed to do it or are you not? And if you want to do if you want to, the zoning board of appeals deals with questions of use, whether or not you're allowed. So that if you want to do a special use or you want to say like, I think this use should basically, essentially the planning board most of the time doesn't have authority over uses.
In other municipalities or other
Yeah.
places. That's interesting.
So,
We don't have that luxury.
well, right. And I don't know if
Do we?
well, this is a question is like, now, and I'm not an attorney, so now I'm like, oh man, I hope we're not taking authority that that the board of appeals should has and statutorily.
No, statutorily, I know for sure that they do not.
So
No,
I
I've
think
read that
you're
recently.
probably-
It's not there.
right, that it's like so, but usually those things are split. Like the uses are a separate thing that are much less. There's a lot less question about it. It's like, this is a residential use. You want to put a residential use there? Cool, great. Issues of intensity, planning, but residential use can go there. Retail use can go there. You're allowed to do those things on that site. You might have special conditions that say if you're going to do a retail use, you can tie, planning board requirements to that, or, requirements that the planning board is going to review. That might, you might do that. Like you need to have a storefront or, whatever.
Right.
But as far as whether or not you can do it, it's already decided. It's in the ordinance, the zoning board deals with that. Which I think for the most part, I think fits here. I think it kind of tracks because with the exception of the special permit.
Yeah.
Especially if it's not a special use permit, then the planning board's really not reviewing use things. You might be reviewing like design questions and um, site standards and things like that,
Yeah, I mean,
that might be tied to uses, but
it's really just a checkbox.
which is, I mean, form-based code does lean that way of it. Yeah, the uses are, well, basically, we don't care what the uses are. I mean, that's not how this ordinance, but like a pure form-based code, we don't care what you're doing as long as it fits in the box.
Right.
Box being the literal building.
Right.
So, which we don't need to solve this now. That's the questions on here that I'm like, we gotta give some thought to about. I think what it comes down to is there are standards that need to, the standards of review change depending on the use. Is essentially where I think these version, the expanded use permit, I have said special use permit here.
Mhm.
Those shift a bit, or who's reviewing it at least changes depending.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, that is really interesting, I guess. I gotta think more about it.
yeah.
I can't. Expanded use permit always comes to the planning board, period, end of story.
Mhm.
But just a regular use permit, either a change of use or a new use permit. That could be completely handled administratively by the CE.
And I think for the most part, people probably don't know to even request a change of use.
No, it's well known. It's a
Yep.
well-known concept. What they might not know or fully appreciate in the core zoning code is that a change of use is only required when you're going from one category of use to another category of use, not from individual use to individual use. So if you're in like commercial services category, you can change your use within your building or on your site without getting a change of use permit. But if you're going to change from commercial services to industrial use category, you have to get a change of use permit.
I mean, I'm just looking at rural D1 and within commercial services, there's things that are permittable. There's a bunch that requires, whether it's any use. Continuing permit with the CPO, you could change within the category. Like,
In which case it would happen. Yeah.
changing within the category, and it's also residential retaining permit.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good qualifier. Absolutely. And, I mean, you still have to comply with all the standards.
I think there's ironing out there that needs to happen, but the use things, like a use can almost be treated the same way that a non-conforming structure can be. Like if you have a restaurant use in a building, in a zone where, that's not, the zoning changes and it's not allowed anymore, you can continue that restaurant use as a legally existing nonconformity until you discontinue it for a year.
Right.
And then you would lose that
Yep.
right to start it up again. And I think that happened. That is why I even raised the non-conforming thing, because if you've got, farm vendor market in somewhere and you want to change users, it doesn't matter. You don't need app, but if you want to change uses, like you do need to ask, then you do have a use permit. But when this stuff comes up, what I think about is like, did you establish that you're using, did you establish your use? Because if something changes, you still have that right basically to do it. How do we track it?
Well, I think
I don't think we really.
We don't have to solve it right now, but I
Yeah.
think the argument you're making is that it can exist as an independent permitting track.
Yeah, basically.
And unless it falls into by requirements of the code, it falls into. This must be reviewed by the planning board or whatever the case may be.
Still, that's still different from small project, right?
Right.
It's still a use track. rather than
Yeah,
project track.
Because I think if you were to bring something forward and say, I want to build a where but if you were to bring something forward and say, I want to build a daycare facility in neighborhood residential, which is just permitted, you don't need a use permit, but it's permitted. You want to build you want to put it in your mixed use building. The standards for the building are going to be, what site standards, building standards, design standards. The only thing that's going to apply to that daycare is going to be what's in the use standard section.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
right. I mean, so that's.
Unless, then there are some odd cases like drive-throughs
Mhm.
where the use triggers. Something
It's, yeah,
in another section.
well, I don't think the drive-through wouldn't be a use. That would be
We actually have it as.
do we list it as a use?
Yeah.
Is the
Might be weird.
district for
Right. Yeah.
highway commercial,
Yeah, right.
the only place.
Is that the only place?
I think that's the only place you can do that.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah, for the most part, it flows.
I think this is the exercise of going through and sorting all of this administrative and like, how do we do this will probably result in hopefully, not just like good, clear forms and applications and documents and a process, but also help us figure out well, what, is this a use? Should this be regulated as a form type thing, like the drive-through?
Yep.
And who's going to review it,
Right.
All of this stuff hopefully will line up and.
Yep. I agree. I love it.
So,
Thank you for working on it. So what's your plan with the application guidance form from here?
I'm gonna try and work with, and George has seen this, I showed it to him, try and work with George and Shelley and Emma, anybody who's in the office, Kevin, and see like, does this make sense for you, for what you do on a daily basis? And I think the next, once we deal with the use stuff a little bit and I get my head around that, I think actual application forms. One of the things we had talked about was like also data tracking and saying, well, part of this is to say, applicant, give us all the information that is going to be necessary. So we only ask you for this stuff once and we don't say, oh, well, now I need this. Oh, well, now I need this. So there's that to help the applicant give us the information that's needed, help the reviewing authority get the information that's needed, and then also because all of this gets entered into a spreadsheet at some point, like what permit was issued. And one of the things that isn't really tracked on there that I think just basic would be really useful is how many units we're creating in this project. For the most part, it's like one is a unit added or not. But sometimes you get projects like the 10 Mills Road is adding 16 units. So to track that so we can look like over the last 10 years, if we had a spreadsheet that said how many square feet of retail, how many, so that way if we get all these applications, hopefully it all adds up. Hey, we've got 100 new units because here's these applications that have. So that's the other. But I think it's the forms at some point, the application form. So what I'd like to, which you all are welcome to have input or just completely ignore. You're gonna be using it, so I feel like you'd want it, but also if you don't have any interest in.
Well, I'm
coming up with
definitely
applications.
interested, but of course, I've said this to you before, my interest is actually providing good archival documentation. So that we're not in the position we're in right now, which is if we pull an old application like this one from 2 years ago. Often I find myself looking at it and going, okay, what are they actually trying to do? It's not clear sometimes. You know what I mean? You're still questioning, like, yes, we have a form. Yes, they fill it out. Does it actually explain what they're trying to do? I don't think it does a good enough job explaining it or capturing it. So that someone in the future could look back at it and go, oh, I understand completely what they were proposing to do, what they were approved to do. That's not, those aren't meshing up right now very well. It can be better, a lot. So that,
And that side of things really is less about like stopping things from happening or, you know, making sure that the only approved things happen and more about like, you're a property owner. That really protects property owners' rights. Like what you were approved to do this, you now have the right to build that or build it there or use it for this. And if in 5 years, some neighbor comes and says, I don't like this use, I didn't realize what's happened, whatever. It's like, well, the town approved it. Like we went through all the process. They were approved to do this.
And if it's not clear what they're to do,
Right.
then you're still
well,
arguing.
then you're still arguing. Yeah,
Right.
exactly, right. Yeah.
So that's that hopefully we can get to that point because you know everybody focuses on can I build this year? Yes, okay, cool. Then leave me alone and go build what you just told me to build. But maintaining it, selling it, doing whatever else, be good. We also protect us.
Well reported, exactly. Okay,
That's all I got.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Anybody got anything else? Then without objection. No objections, meeting adjourned. Time is 8:08.